for the summer.
Yep.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world, with your time zone. Good afternoon, Ivo. How are you?
Good afternoon to everyone. Hi there. Good to see you again.
So, how have you been? How have you been holding up?
Oh, good, good. It's too
Still in
cold for me, so I'm
cold?
I'm just as you waiting for the summer and
Uh,
very
st-
happy when the sun shines, when it shines.
Still in lockdown?
Yep, still in lockdown,
Mm,
still being being harassed by the kids and the wife,
okay. Yeah,
as it should be.
we need the lockdown to be lifted very very soon. Go
Yeah,
crazy.
should be
But
should
that's
be the
not what we're going to discuss today. Today we'll
no.
talk a little bit about the Declaration of Conformity and what the people should know about it. At first, I would wanted to go back to our last presentation, which we did on the new market surveillance
Smart.
regulation of
Yep.
the European Union. Um, did you get any feedback on that?
Well, the thing is that you see the market moving quickly now. So we talked about it about 2 weeks ago, and you see the market is doing their due diligence now and making sure that they're ready to when it drops and when it's final and when you should have it done. And
Mm-hmm.
you see that work is being done very quickly right now. So
Yeah,
anybody that's still up in the air about if they should, I think it's a good time now to get started with it.
yeah.
Before you're too late and you're behind the
Well,
ball.
16th of July, then it's when this new regulation comes into force. And as we discussed last time, and we'll not talk too much about it because people can go back to the
Yeah.
previous episode and see it. But it has some effect on businesses that are exporting to the EU from outside of the EU, and they are now required to take some measures, basically to have an authorized representative, or to work with an importer, or to work with a fulfillment service provider that can provide them the services of single point of contact. Yeah, over the last few weeks after this presentation, we have been receiving a lot of questions, a lot of requests. See if we can help them. So that
Yeah.
was very good. Yeah.
Yep. True.
Uh, Today we're going to discuss another important topic that we receive a lot of questions on. I think maybe every
Declaration of conformity.
right, the Declaration of Conformity. I think
Yeah.
there is not a single week that we do not receive any questions about
Questions.
it. So
True.
this is why we thought that we would do a little presentation and a little bit of discussion. And for those of you who are watching, I mean, please feel free to leave
Yeah.
your
We have chat
questions
box.
in the
If
chat
you have
box
any questions,
somewhere
just
below,
type
beside.
'em in,
Yeah.
and I'll be
Uh,
glad to shoot them to Han and make sure that everything's covered.
right. We can answer them straight on the live stream.
Yep.
If you have questions after the live stream has ended, you can obviously still contact us. You can also leave your questions and comments in the comment box on Facebook and on YouTube.
Yep. And we'll
So
get back to you as soon as we can.
reach out to us. Yeah.
Yes.
So let me just move towards the presentation without further ado.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we will be discussing Declaration of Conformity. And in this presentation, I want to discuss some of the main questions that we typically receive. What is a Declaration of Conformity? Who issues a Declaration of Conformity? Why is a Declaration of Conformity required?
Mhm.
When should a Declaration of Conformity be drawn up? And how should it be provided? Where to send the Declaration of Conformity to? And actually how to draw up the Declaration of Conformity. So let's first start with what is actually a Declaration of Conformity. Well, basically a Declaration of Conformity is a one-page document, a statement, a written confirmation that in which you write the products indicated on the Declaration of Conformity satisfy the relevant requirements of the EU regulations that apply to your products. So typically what you will find on a declaration of conformity is a specification of the product. So which product are we talking about?
Yep.
The regulations that you claim compliance or conformity with.
Yep.
And the standards that you have applied to prove that you comply with the regulations. Another important question is now, who is responsible for this declaration of conformity? Who should draw it up? There are several occasions here, several possibilities. First of all, manufacturer of the product. And here it really does not matter where that manufacturer is located. So the manufacturer can be located in the EU, but if the manufacturer is located outside, so for example in the US and Canada, Australia or China, the manufacturer can still draw up the declaration of conformity. Declaration of conformity may also be drawn up by an authorized representative if the authorized representative has been instructed to do so on behalf of the manufacturer. Sometimes you see on a declaration of conformity both the manufacturer and his authorized representative. So that is by itself, it's not wrong. Last point that I wanted to make about this is that it is important that a declaration of conformity is always signed by a person that is authorized to sign on behalf of the company. Mm-hmm. So typically this is a person on the level of vice president or even higher. This is typically not the case with individual engineers who probably do not have the authorization to sign on behalf of the company. Yeah. No. Then the question, why is a declaration of conformity required in the first place? Well, there are several reasons for that. First of all, it is basically an obligation to do this in order to make you aware that by drawing up and signing the document, you are resuming responsibility for the product's compliance with the relevant EU requirements, regulations, and directives. So it is, you could say it is a legal document, it's a legal statement, and you should be aware of that, obviously. And secondly, it's for information purposes, because maybe some of your clients, companies who buy products from you, if this, for example, business to business, they need this information in order to basically assess whether the product is fit for their purpose. Yeah. So that can be a reason as well.
In layman's terms, it means making sure that everything that you're selling is correct and is being built in a way that is according to the rules we have in the EU.
Yeah. The CE marking itself is just, well, it's a symbol, it's a logo. Yeah. So you really have no information. What does that mean? It's only, it says that it complies, but it doesn't tell you what it complies to. If you want to know this, you really need the declaration of conformity so you can get that information. Yeah. So when would you draw it up? Declaration of conformity is drawn up at the moment after conformity assessment. So after you have assessed the conformity, mm-hmm. and before placing a product on the market. And placing a product on the market in this regard is the first time that a product is made available in the EU market. So let's say you found new customers. This is the first time that you're going to ship the product to Europe, sell the product in Europe. And at that moment, you need to assess that the product indeed also complies with EU regulations, safety regulations, and sometimes environmental protection requirements. Yeah. At that moment, before you start shipping, you need to make sure that the product complies. Once you have done that exercise, so to speak, then is the time to drop the Declaration of Conformity.
Yes.
Yeah. So where to provide the Declaration of Conformity to? Well, this really differs. You would have to go into the specific directive or regulation to find out the specific requirements, because sometimes it differs from one regulation to another.
Yeah.
In general, we can say there are more or less two cases. Some regulations, they require the Declaration of Conformity to accompany the product itself. So in that case, you would include it, for example, in your shipping documents, or in another solution that we often see is that manufacturers print a copy of the Declaration of Conformity in their user manual. And if the user manual has to accompany the product as well, so in that case, you are killing two birds with one stone, basically. There is no central database for declarations of conformity. There is no registry for declarations of conformity. And sometimes that surprises our customers, especially when they come from markets in which it is very common that that there are product registries. But in this case, in the EU, that has been considered to be a trade barrier, and therefore it's not. There is no central database in which the product is registered or declarations of conformity are uploaded. What you need to do actually is to keep a copy of the Declaration of Conformity available for inspection. So basically, we have the case either you need to provide a copy together with the product. And in other cases, for example, electrical products, that is not required. And in that case, you just keep a copy of the Declaration of Conformity available for inspection. And you keep that copy in what we call the technical file. And the technical file, well, probably we're going to do another session about technical file soon. But technical file is basically the collection of product compliance documentation, those documents that prove that your products comply. Where necessary and where you have an authorized representative, you can obviously also provide a copy of the Declaration of Conformity to the authorized representative. And typically, this is also something that an authorized representative will require you to provide them with, because really, it's one of the first documents that market surveillance authorities ask for.
Will ask, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
So,
the one of the primary reasons that they exist is only to make sure that they can offer the files and the information to market authorities when asked,
yeah,
and not you have to go from country to country, making sure that you have everything.
absolutely. So the next point that we want to discuss is how to draw up Declaration of Conformity. And for this, well, the overview is over here, and I'm going to show you basically a template. On the basis of that, we're going to discuss this. But the elements that you will always find on a Declaration of Conformity is unique identification number, the name and manufacturer of the name and address of the manufacturer, of his authorized representative, if that is relevant. The statement, which we'll look into a little bit closer. Obviously, the products, including specifications for traceability. So that means model numbers, SKUs, or other types of indications that for his product, for the product.
Barcodes part of that as well?
Barcodes, yeah,
They're on the
EAN, yeah, it's the EAN number you could use for that. Yeah. Obviously, the specification of the relevant EU regulations and directives, and also the standards that you have applied. In some cases, and you will see it here, between brackets, name and address of the notified body, because that's not always required. For a lot of products, I would say 90% of the products do not require the intervention of a notified body, and in that case, you don't need to specify that. And the name and the name, the signature, the date, and the title of the person who was signing, and when it was signed. And sometimes CE marking, and in some cases, we see this happens sometimes, is that manufacturers include pictures of their products in a declaration of conformity. This is not typically a requirement. It's also not wrong to do that. So if you have space to do that, then you can do that. Yeah. So let's move to. Let me see if I can just change. Maybe an example of a declaration of conformity. So let's. So I hope you can see that well. Let me zoom in a little bit further even. So this is a template that fulfills those requirements that I just mentioned. So you would start out with that unique identification number, and you can put it here, for example, on top. The purpose of that unique identification number is communication, it's clarification. So it is basically the market surveillance authorities, they would ask you for the documents that that belong to or in accordance with the unique identification number that you've specified on the Declaration of Conformity. So you can make one up.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter how it looks, but obviously when you make one up, you need to be able to find it. So you need to understand what it means. If you get a request, please can we get the files for this identification number? And if you don't remember, then obviously that doesn't look very good. So
it's just for looking up purposes.
Yes. Communication makes it much easier. Of course, if you are a small company and you have only a handful of products, then that is typically not a problem. But there are companies that have thousands and thousands of products.
Exactly.
Then a unique.
It would be nice to make sure that you can search for one and not go through everything.
Absolutely. So the next thing that is we discussed the manufacturer's name and address, and or the name and address of the person who is your authorized representative. And here you find that statement that I was mentioning earlier. In this case, it's a statement which conforms to what has been specified in the machinery directive. This template is following the requirements of the machinery directive. And so it says this declaration of conformity is issued under the sole responsibility of the manufacturer. And that statement is almost always the same or quite similar. Next, here it says objects of the declaration. So what that means is basically the product. So this is where you specify the product, and you do that by showing the name. And then here you can indicate the model numbers, the type specifications of the product. Next is this is also quite a cryptical sentence. Forgive us, we didn't invent this. We just took it from, in this case, the machinery directive. So the object of the declaration described above is in conformity with the relevant community harmonization legislation. And then you see here specifications of the different, in this case, directives that apply to this product. And you note that what we have done here is to write out the full title of the directive. Then going further down, references to the relevant harmonized standard used or referenced to the specifications in relation to which conformity is declared. In other words, which standards have been used to prove compliance with the requirements of the directives and regulations. Please note that typically you would indicate here the European standards, the European versions of standards, because only the European standards that are considered to be harmonized standards benefit or lead to a presumption of conformity. Yeah. What that means is a presumption of conformity. Your product complies with the relevant European harmonized standard. Then it's automatically presumed to comply with the directive or regulation. Which standards are harmonized standards? This is determined by the European Commission. They basically, they are checking or they having checked the content of certain standards. Some standards are developed specifically with a mandate to make them harmonized under a directive or regulation. Sometimes they are just reviewing existing standards in order to determine, is the content of this standard harmonized with the requirements of the directives and regulation? And if this is the case, you benefit from this presumption of conformity. And then here is the place where you would sign for or on behalf of, and then your company name, the place and the date of issue, and then the name of the person's signature and the title would go here. Clear?
Yes, very clear. I think so.
Okay. So next up is questions. So,
well, there's one thing I wanted to add to the last template that you had, because we also build these templates as well.
yes.
So companies that are being helped by us or are hire us to help them, let's call it like it is. Yeah. They will receive those templates and checklists. So making sure that you can build that DOC without any problems or without any hesitation or being unsure of things. Otherwise, we are also here to call and guide you through that process as well.
Yes, obviously, we can help you to fill out the Declaration of Conformity in the correct way. Yeah. Yep. So there were some questions.
Yes.
So maybe you can.
I have some questions. Well, there are some. We get quite a lot of questions, as you mentioned. We get quite a lot of questions about those DOCs, and one of the most important things to know is what is the biggest or the most common misunderstanding about a DOC. So I thought maybe you could elaborate on that a bit and make sure that everybody knows exactly the differences between the things.
Yes, misunderstandings. That's a good one. Yes, we can do that. So one of the misunderstandings that we see a lot is that companies ask us, our product is within the scope of several directives and regulations. Does that mean that we have to issue a declaration of conformity for all those directives and regulations separately? And the answer is no. You make one declaration of conformity which lists all the directives and all the standards that you have applied.
Yeah. All right. Another big question that we had.
There is another point to make because of misunderstanding. Actually, let me see. I'm going to bring it on the screen. 1 second. I need to go here. All right, let's switch to that. I have an example. Mm-hmm. which illustrates a lot of things. It illustrates some mistakes. It illustrates also, it's a good illustration for this misunderstanding.
Yeah.
What we see here is, well, it says EC Declaration of Conformity. Yeah. And then some specifications looks like what we discussed, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But there are a few mistakes here. I don't mean necessarily the format. Mm-hmm. Format seems to be okay, but one of the things that is not correct is, here it mentions, first of all, EC Declaration of Conformity. Yeah. Now this is an older Declaration of Conformity signed in 2015, so it may be due to that. By the way, the black bars I added just in respect to privacy. Yeah. So nowadays we would say EU Declaration of Conformity. Yeah, it's a little bit annoying. So that sometimes changes. In the last, before it was called just Declaration of Conformity, then the European Commission started to introduce the term EC Declaration of Conformity. Now it is EU Declaration of Conformity. Maybe in 5 years it will be something else, but
European Declaration of Conformity, probably.
Yeah, who knows? What is more troublesome in this case is that what is maybe not immediately apparent to you, but this is a declaration of conformity which has been issued by a test laboratory. Mm-hmm. And that is actually not correct. So a declaration of conformity is not to be issued by a test laboratory or certification body. The declaration of conformity is the document that is issued by the manufacturer on his own behalf. Yep. So there is sometimes misunderstanding about this. Secondly, I think that what we can use this example also for is to show that how we would actually look at such a declaration of conformity to spot if it's good or not. One of the things that we would look at the standards. And here actually the standards are obsolete, but I will come back to that. Yeah. So that is and this is an example where we see a few things that are wrong. I told you before, CE marking sometimes may be a part of the declaration of conformity. For some directives and regulations, it actually mentions that CE marking shall be affixed to the declaration of conformity as well. Other directives do not have that requirement, so it's not consistent in this regard. Yeah. There were other questions.
Yes, a couple of good ones I think is you have different declarations. There are a couple. What is the difference between a declaration of conformity and a declaration of performance and a declaration of incorporation? Because we get that question quite a lot. I think very logically, because it
yes.
doesn't make it very easy to understand if you have a couple of them.
Yeah. So first of all, it's good to mention this is not a mistake. There are such things as declaration of performance and declaration of incorporation in CE regulations. The declaration of performance is a declaration which is a part which is mentioned in the construction products regulation specifically. That's the only EU CE regulation where this term occurs. Right. And the reason it's very specific is because the construction products regulation applies to construction products. There is very little to say about safety or conformity of construction products because you would always need to know where is this construction product going to be applied. Yeah, because the climatic conditions, the geographic conditions throughout Europe are very, very different. Yeah, and therefore a construction product which is fit for use in one country may not be fit for use in another country. So, for example, in Spain, the climatic conditions are quite different than they are in Sweden. So that is taken into account in that regulation. And therefore, the requirements of the construction product regulations are requirements not to be complied with, so to speak. It doesn't lead to safety or compliance. But what you are supposed to prove under the construction products regulation is that a certain construction product is fit for use in certain circumstances. And the standards under the construction products regulation, they have different performance criteria and performance levels for different types of products. And so what the purpose of the declaration of performance is to specify what the performance of that particular, of your particular construction product is.
Yep.
So that's the declaration of performance. I hope I explained that well.
Perfect.
If you don't understand, let me know. I'll try again.
Exactly.
The second question.
I don't think you're going to get it a lot clearer than this.
Yeah.
Because it is hard and it is difficult matter to go through and to learn about.
Well, maybe we can put it like this. If you are not manufacturer or importer or seller of a construction product, then you can forget about this name. The second is you asked about the declaration of incorporation.
Yes.
Now, declaration of incorporation, again, is a very specific, it applies to very specific cases. It is a declaration, like the Declaration of Conformity. It looks quite similar, but it applies only, or it falls only under the Machinery Directive, so it's the only place where you will see this Declaration of Conformity, and it is specifically for machines that are not finished yet. The machines that are not finished yet and that are intended to be incorporated into a larger installation of machine. Okay? So for that purpose, the Machinery Directive requires the manufacturer to issue a declaration of incorporation. Why a declaration of incorporation and not of conformity? It's because the manufacturer of the unfinished machine cannot declare compliance. No. Because compliance would depend on what the final user or his customer will do with the product.
Yeah? But you can do that declaration of incorporation because that part is already done, right? So the
exactly.
part that is already done can be, all right.
Exactly, and actually the declaration of incorporation has a section where you would specify exactly which requirements of the Machinery Directive you have applied, and so your customer with that declaration of incorporation can actually see whether you have applied the requirements that are important for them and which ones they still need to look at. Yeah. Okay.
I had one more question.
Sure.
One more quite important question. Are there any requirements for the languages of the DOC?
Yes. There may be. Let's put it like that. And in this regard, it's maybe I can show it here. It's really I'm going too big now. It really depends on the case whether a declaration of conformity is required to be delivered together with the product, as I indicated before. Some directives regulations require this, or not. Yeah. Yep. So typically what we see is if a declaration of conformity is required to be delivered with the product, then there are typically also requirements for providing a translation of the Declaration of Conformity in the national languages. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. national languages, yes, that's multiple. So that means that if a country has multiple official languages, you would have to provide translation of the Declaration of Conformity in those national languages.
Yep.
Yeah. Then we have the case that that Declaration of Conformity is not delivered together with the product. Yeah. And with those directives and regulations, what we typically see is that there are no language requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are no language requirements, then you do not have to provide a translation. Now, mind you also, so in a lot of cases, Declaration of Conformity is only to be provided to market surveillance authorities because they need to understand which regulations and standards you have applied to your product. In some cases, as we have also given examples today, in some cases like construction products, it is important that your client understands what you have applied, and therefore then it is important for them to receive a copy of the Declaration of Conformity.
Yep, very clear.
Should you always provide it? Well, there is no reason not to provide it to a customer that asks for it. It's basically being transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
I see. Let's check in the chat box. At this moment, no other questions in the chat box as well.
I've been checking as well. Didn't see anything.
So that means I think that we can conclude this this topic. Any thoughts from your side, Ivo?
Well, I think we should try to come back to this to the DOC part in our next stream as well. And I hope I can get some more questions from customers or people that are interested. I mean, maybe we can go through those when we start that new stream to make sure that everybody that has watched the last one can maybe get into it a little bit more again, and we can answer some burning questions that someone else has, because we've been doing some research as well, and I've had some questions before, but maybe there are some new questions coming up as well.
Hopefully, we were able to shed some light on this topic, and it became a little bit more clear. But we understand that when you sit down and actually you are trying to make a declaration of conformity, even if you have templates for it, it is still questions arise. And in that case, reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you. And yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're frozen.
I'm frozen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that case, I think it is a good time. If you are frozen, it's a good time to close this live stream for today.
Yeah.
What we would like to ask those of you who are watching now or who are watching the recording is if you have ideas or suggestions for future live streams, topics that you would like us to discuss, maybe do a presentation about. We have plans also for interviews. Interviews are coming up as well. And if you have suggestions for that, also leave them in chat box, in comment box, in email. If you want to reach us directly, send a message to hello@aluragroup.com. So that's hello@aluragroup, ALURAGROUP.com. I will be happy to help you. Anything else, Ivo?
No. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
That watched.
That's very good. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We're going to
see anyone that is interested in our next stream. We'll try to let everybody know when it's dropping, and make sure that everybody is able to look. We think this is a good time. If anybody has any suggestions time-wise as well, just let us know.
Yes, we try to cater to both our customers in North America, in Europe, and maybe even a piece of Asia.
Yep.
And so we thought this may be a good time, but let us know if this doesn't work for you, and we can have a look.
Yep.
We're trying to find the right time slot, and then the idea is that we push out more of these kinds of presentations and discussions. So,
Exactly.
thank you very much. We're going to leave again with some music and some dancing. So put your dancing shoes on, Ivo.
Yo,
It's the,
I already have them on.
I mean, I didn't have any time to make an outro, so it's just the intro playing again. But
That's
and
okay.
we'll close the stream. Thank you very much. Take care. Stay safe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.